Have you ever wondered about the man who led the largest slave rebellion in Rome's history? Let's delve into the story of Spartacus, a tale that begins in the rugged lands of Thrace. Born in an era of strife and conflict, Spartacus grew up amidst the harsh realities of life. Life, however, had a harsher ordeal in store for him. Captured by the Romans, he was sold into slavery, forced to leave his homeland behind. His new life began in the gladiatorial school in Capua, a place far removed from the freedom of his early years. Here, under the whip and the watchful eyes of his masters, he was molded into a gladiator, a spectacle for the Roman masses. The conditions were deplorable, the training brutal, and yet, in this crucible of violence and oppression, a spark was kindled, a spark that would set ablaze an uprising unparalleled in history. Thus, a seemingly ordinary Thracian man was set on the path to become a legendary figure. But how did a mere gladiator ignite the flame of the biggest slave rebellion in history? The answer to this question begins with a single act of defiance. Spartacus, a man trained to fight and die for the amusement of others, saw in himself and his fellow gladiators not mere entertainers, but warriors. One night he led a group of about 70 gladiators in a daring escape from their training school in Capua. Armed with makeshift weapons, they fought their way to freedom, leaving the once formidable school in their wake. Once outside the confines of their prison, they took to the countryside, spreading the word of their rebellion. Like a wildfire, the spark of rebellion ignited the hearts of the oppressed. More and more slaves, yearning for freedom, flocked to Spartacus's cause. The numbers grew, and so did their courage. With an army of freed slaves behind him, Spartacus was ready to challenge the might of Rome. Can you imagine the courage it took to wage war against the most powerful empire on earth? This was the audacious reality Spartacus and his band of determined rebels faced as they took up arms against Rome. In a series of engagements that can only be described as a David versus Goliath scenario, Spartacus and his slave army repeatedly defied the odds. They had no grand army, no fortress, and no powerful allies, yet they triumphed in battle after battle against the mighty Roman legions. And why was this? It was due in large part to the strategic genius of Spartacus himself. Spartacus was not just a warrior. He was a tactician, a leader who understood the battlefield as well as he understood the hearts of his men. He knew that their strength lay not in their numbers, but in their determination, their unity, and their desire for freedom. Against overwhelming odds, he kept the rebellion alive. He turned every disadvantage into an advantage, every setback into an opportunity. He made the impossible possible, proving that courage and resilience can hold its own against might and power. But the rebels were not an endless force. They were a finite number against an empire that could afford to lose thousands. Despite their victories, the rebels were outnumbered, and their fate was sealed. As we'll discover, Spartacus's story is not one of ultimate victory, but of enduring legacy. So, what was the fate of Spartacus and his rebellion? Alas, the rebellion, despite its initial successes, met a grim end. Spartacus and his army, having at one point stretched the limits of Rome, were finally cornered in a fateful battle. Spartacus, the gladiator who had turned into a general, fought valiantly till his last breath. His body was never found, lost amidst the thousands who fell that day, but his spirit remained unbroken. The aftermath of the rebellion was brutal, even by Roman standards. Thousands of surviving slaves were crucified along the Appian Way, a chilling spectacle of power and punishment. Rome wanted to erase the memory of Spartacus and his rebellion, but the more they tried, the more his story spread. Despite his tragic end, Spartacus became more than just a man. He transcended into a symbol of resistance, a beacon of hope for the oppressed. His story echoed through the ages, inspiring countless revolts and shaping many freedom movements. His name became synonymous with the unyielding human spirit that refuses to be shackled, that dares to challenge the mighty, and that fights for freedom against all odds. Spartacus may have fallen, but his legacy lived on. He became a symbol of resistance and freedom, reminding us that even in the face of insurmountable odds, the human spirit can rise above.